Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. When we think about the mechanics of the 19th century empire, we usually picture vast armies, drawn up maps, and totally conquered territories. But the true engines of imperialism? They were actually psychological. Let's pull back the curtain and uncover the hidden mechanics of the civilizing mission. Okay, let's dive into this by putting yourself into two deeply opposing sets of shoes. On side A, imagine you're a late 19th century European official or missionary. You genuinely believe you're bringing education, science, and civilization to a less advanced society. But now step into side B. Your land has literally just been seized, your centuries-old traditions are dismissed as backward, and your resources are controlled by outsiders who insist with a straight face that this is all for your own good.
Section 1. The Imperial Contradiction.
So this jarring paradox, oppression framed as salvation, is the central mystery we're unpacking today. European powers desperately needed raw materials, things like rubber and cotton, to fuel the Industrial Revolution. But here's the catch. Money alone couldn't sell the empire to the masses back home. You just can't pitch a purely greedy resource grab to the public. To convince ordinary citizens that empire building was a moral, noble necessity, a really powerful ideology had to be engineered.
Moving on to Section 2. Justifying Empire through Culture.
The core assumption fueling this entire system was Eurocentrism. Basically, Europeans increasingly view their newly industrialized societies as the absolute standard, the benchmark by which all other human beings should be measured. And this worked right alongside social Darwinism, which was a deeply flawed application of survival of the fittest to human races, creating an artificial hierarchy of societies. All of this culminated in the concept of the white man's burden. Now, you've probably heard that phrase, popularized by the writer Rudyard Kipling, but it wasn't just a catchy poem. It was a pervasive worldview and a global policy directive. It mandated that Europeans had a literal duty to civilize the globe, dictating everything from school curriculums in London to administrative laws in colonial Africa. And this brilliantly illustrates the three main camps historians use to debate the really complex motivations behind empire building. You've got the economic hunt for resources and labor, the nationalist obsession with outcompeting rival empires, and of course, the ideological fuel of racism and Eurocentrism that justified the whole shebang. Section 3. The Power of Perception. This brings us to a concept called Orientalism. Western writers, painters, and scholars systematically portrayed non-Western societies as exotic, irrational, backward, or entirely childlike. And it's absolutely crucial to understand that this wasn't just innocent artistic expression. It was a heavily weaponized framework designed specifically to shape public perception. Because think about it. If you can convince your public that colonized societies are childlike and utterly incapable of self-governance, then imperial rule suddenly transforms, right? It's no longer a brutal military conquest. It's successfully framed as a responsible humanitarian rescue mission. Section 4. Technology's Tipping Point. Now, you might be wondering, what actually changed in the 19th century? For hundreds of years, many Asian and African societies had successfully defended their borders from European expansion. So what suddenly tipped the balance of global power so dramatically? Well, the tipping point wasn't some natural superiority. It was tangible, disruptive tech. We're talking industrial technology, modern weapons, and steamships that could navigate deep inland rivers. But the real game changer was actually medicinal, quinine. By heavily mitigating the effects of malaria, it finally allowed Europeans to survive in what historians call mosquito empires. And here is a surprising fun fact. Quinine tasted so horribly bitter that British officials started mixing it with water, sugar, lime, and gin, inadvertently inventing the gin and tonic just to fuel the empire.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 5, Agency and Active Resistance.
We absolutely have to dismantle the old, inaccurate myth of passive victims here. Colonized peoples fiercely shaped the imperial world. They were not simply acted upon. They mounted direct military warfare, organized sophisticated political movements, and leveraged massive labor strikes to cripple colonial economies. On top of that, they used their own religions, schools, and cultural preservation as really powerful tools of defiance. Section 6. How Ideas Shape Power. It's vital to note that imperialism as a global system wasn't an exclusively European phenomenon. During this exact same era, the United States emerged as an imperial power, utilizing identical rhetoric. In places like the Philippines and Puerto Rico, territorial expansion was justified using that very familiar language of spreading democracy, Christianity, and modernization. Which brings us to the core takeaway of this entire explainer. The invisible mechanics of language and perspective were honestly just as powerful as any physical army. Yes, imperialism was maintained by force, but it was sustained and justified by stories, by assumptions, and by manufactured beliefs about who supposedly deserved to rule the world. And that leaves us with a lingering thought. If stories, language, and cultural assumptions were the true engines of global power back in the 1800s, how do ideas shape power today? How does the legacy of these historical assumptions still dictate our modern global relationships? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it gave you a lot to think about.